Hi, I'm Brandon with DCC Builders, and today we're going to talk with Shannon about some hurricane preparedness tips and tricks. We're here in hurricane season now. I think yesterday or the day before was the first day of hurricane season here in
June
Florida.
1st.
June 1st. I think, it's pretty important that we talk about some ways that we can be prepared for this season. And as it so happens, you used to be like the top dog in charge of hurricane preparedness at one of your jobs. Is that right?
I did. At a major hospitality resort location, I was the hurricane manager. So I was responsible for about 100 crew members that orchestrated and organized, keeping people safe, and as we housed them during major hurricanes and their pets. Eventually, we allowed their pets to come, so we had bearded dragons, we had guinea pigs, we had all kinds of different things that we had to kind of just figure out how we accommodate during a storm and that kind of stuff. So yeah, pretty cool, pretty interesting.
That does sound cool. So what were some of the major concerns in having people prepare for a hurricane or be prepared for that worst case scenario?
So in a hospitality setting, you have people that are traveling from all over the world, and they're coming, and then all of a sudden there is a hurricane, and they're not familiar with what that even means. And at this particular location where I worked, or area where I worked, people expected that no matter what, we would keep them safe, which is true. So we lived up to that, and so people could expect that they would be safe, that they would be fed, that they would be accommodated the best that we could during a storm. Obviously, some of the outdoor activities would be changed because if there's a hurricane going on outside, we definitely do not want to be on any amusement attractions or things like that. So we had to kind of accommodate for what we could do inside of a resort or inside of a hotel, and so that became interesting. I shared that we had animals come, so we would do animal shows, and so people would parade their animals through the resorts, and we would vote on them, and we'd do things like that. We'd do indoor games and stuff just to kind of keep people's minds off of being scared and worried, especially those that are not Floridians or not experienced with hurricanes. We wanted to make sure everybody's minds were at ease, and they could just focus on enjoying themselves and their families.
So how would some of these things that you were in charge of orchestrating at your place of employment, how could they carry over into a home, someone's home?
So as a hurricane manager, we set up crews long before a hurricane ever arrives and before hurricane season begins. So we are training, we are staffing, we are making sure we have people have filled out emergency contact information, and I had binders full of just different information on folks that were prepared and ready and know that they would be working outside, possibly in the storm, picking up debris, working inside with our guests and things like that. So there was extensive training prior, so planning, preparedness before a hurricane began. And so we had a skeleton crew, as I said, and we would send the rest of our staff, thousands and thousands of employees, home before the storm came. So a governor, generally in a hurricane state, before a hurricane hits, the governor will say, okay, you all have 24 hours to be on the road, and you need to be off the road within the 24 hours. So, at full capacity and people, and we're hospitality and all of that, obviously our guests aren't able to make arrangements to go back home, and but our cast members are sent home before that storm hits. And so we send them home with a prepared list. Make sure you have cash. Make sure that you have phone numbers written down, not in your cell phone, pulled from your cell phone, but written down, emergency contacts, and that your children know that you are safe, that you have a safe place within your home to go, and what does that look like. And so we would prepare our employees as they went home to weather the storm. We're in as a hospitality industry, we were in a places that were, is that weather mitigated, or, their structures are built to be able to withstand high winds and hurricanes and all of those things. So people who stayed at the resorts are safe. It's the folks that go home that are living in apartments that maybe weren't built structurally sound to withstand a 150 mile an hour winds kind of a situation. So just preparing folks, letting them know we were there for them. If we could accommodate having folks come back or stay with us, we would do that. Employees, we would check on them, things like that.
So it's all about a plan then.
Yes.
So as far as because we're speaking to our homeowners,
Right.
and
Right.
well, not necessarily even owners, but just anybody who lives anywhere as a fact, what can we do with this information that you used at your place of employment?
Have a plan is definitely very important. If you are a local and you've been through a hurricane, you understand that when a hurricane comes and you have a 3-day warning, that the grocery store is now empty, that the gas stations are now packed, and there's, you still have a job to go to, you still have children to pick up, you still have life going on within those 3 days. You don't have time to sit at a gas station for 5 hours, and you don't have time to try and figure out the lines at the bank, or to go find groceries and water and all of those things. Have a plan. Have a checklist. There are plenty of government websites that help you. One of them is floridadisaster.org. That will help you with a little checklist as far as emergency things you'll need. Cash is something I mentioned. Emergency contact phone numbers. Stock up on your gas. And be smart about it. Fill up your gas tank, and during hurricane season, just make sure you're always riding around basically on a full tank. That way you don't have to experience some of those panic times where people just kind of panic and just overload and try and race around. You'll already be prepared. Make sure you have some water on hand. A couple of cases. Just have a couple of cases. It's rare that you are going to blow through all of your cases before your water's fixed or your house is back, running functionally and stuff. But just have a couple of cases. Make sure you have some non-perishable foods. Another thing people don't think of is their animals. Make sure you have pet food and pet supplies, because those things are just like the water running out in the store, so does the pet food. So make sure that you have a good amount of pet food to sustain you if you are out of power. I remember one of the hurricanes we went through a couple of years ago. I think it was
Irma.
It might have been Irma. It was either Irma or Maria. And during that time, we lost power for about 7 days. We had no power for 7 days. And so we had a cat. We had a few chickens at that time, pet chickens. And we had a couple of our beloved furry dogs. And we had to make sure that we had enough supplies for them in the humidity. And we didn't have any water. We had water, but we didn't have electricity, and so it was humid in our house. We had no groceries, things like that. We didn't have a little cooler to sustain us, and those kinds of things. And I had wished we had been more prepared. So just you don't need to go crazy. You're not going to be.
One thing that people do is they'll fill up buckets with water.
People fill up drums of water. Yes.
Right. Well, not drums, but just
5
5-gallon buckets, and if you get a few of those, it kind of helps out if your water does get turned off, or if you're on a well. You can actually fill up the tank of your toilet so that you can flush the toilet.
Another thing to think of is having a little small first aid kit somewhere in your house. That's always a good idea. You just never know, and so you could be fumbling around in the dark and you forget where your coffee table is and bump your knee, and now you've got a cut and everything. There's no way you're going to a hospital at that point. So just have something to be able to take care of yourself. Baby formula, diapers, and those kinds of things. Make sure you have those items, because there's some grocery stores, when we had those hurricanes subsequently, like right in a row, some of the grocery stores shut down. So those were places where people get their formula and their baby's items and things like that. So make sure you have some of those on hand if you're able to. Like I said, you don't need to go and fill up a whole storage room full of recovery items, but have a few things, some of your few essentials that to make sure, you know what, if I was out of power and in that situation, I would be able to sustain myself at least for a few days until,
So
know where your local shelters are too. That's another one.
That's a good one, definitely, especially, if you live in a stick-built home or possibly a manufactured home. It may
Or
not
if
be
you
safe
use
to stay there during a
HART
hurricane.
machines. You use HART machines and you have no electricity. You're going to need to have a place where there is electricity, and that would be a shelter. So those are my tips for you.
So another thing, so really not another thing, but just going off of what you're saying there, maybe it's just a matter of changing your habits. A lot of people might drive around, let their gas tank get empty, and then put 20 or 30 bucks in there. Or maybe they wait until, that is you. Actually, I was thinking of you precisely. They might wait until they're out of water before they get more water, but instead of, just kind of shifting your habits a little bit and just letting your gas tank get down to half a tank and then topping it off and then just never going below half a tank. Just a simple little shift there, and that will ensure that you have gasoline if ever we do come into a crisis like that. Same thing with water or non-perishable foods. Those are all things that you're going to want to have around. Non-perishable foods that you can easily prepare without electricity. You can always boil some water and have top ramen. That's always an option that's easy to go to.
If you go on FEMA's website during hurricane time, they usually will tell you locations for sandbags for your home. You can also find, like I said, if you go on NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Association .org, that
Fancy.
yes, very fancy. You can actually track what's going on with the storm. They'll give you some if there's some states of emergency going on, they'll keep you posted there. So it's really important to stay informed. I've come across a lot of people that say, it's just a hurricane. I've lived here 50 years and I've lived right on through them. And that is fine. But what does it hurt to be prepared, right?
Well, and plus, you never know about tornadoes. Tornadoes a lot of times are following hurricanes or all around hurricanes. And I mean, there's no way to prepare for a tornado, and you never know when one's going to come, and they're brutal. They can be devastating, even more so than a hurricane. So being prepared, which really leads me into preparing your home. How can we prepare our homes, and what kinds of things should we do there? You got a few items, I think, that you can think of right offhand?
You see lots of people going to get boards from like the big box stores, getting boards to fit they cut them up, they fit their window.
Plywood.
But I'll tell you that if you are in a location where the storm is being tracked towards in your area, your county, those boards are gone. There is nobody with the big box stores that have the boards for you or the clips to hold them in or any of those things. So you were just, it becomes unfortunately a panic situation.
So prepare now, right?
So prepare now.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have boards for your windows, and especially if you live in Florida. You can just keep those out in your shed or up in the rafters of the garage or whatever. But yeah, don't wait until it's an actual emergency to go get your boards.
Yeah.
It's too late then, because everybody's panicking and they're going to be expensive. They're going to be hard to find. You're going to waste tons of time trying to get them, and it just becomes a whole thing.
Loose items outside, you want to make sure that those are all picked up. Your lawn chairs, your potted plants, and those kinds of things are all picked up. You want to make sure you have little and I talk about animals. I'm just an animal lover. If you have animals that are outside right now, we have a cat that's lived outside for 6 years. She lives in our front yard or backyard, and she's always lived there. She doesn't like to come in, but we make sure we have a pen for her, a kennel cage for her to bring her in and
get her a litter box.
And those kinds of things.
One thing about gathering up the loose items in your yard, a trick that a lot of Floridians use, and I've learned it from other people who've lived there or lived here for a long time, because I'm not originally from here, but is you can take a lot of the smaller items in your yard, you can kind of put them all around in one area. One bunch, and then you can surround it by the larger items, and then you take a rope or something, and you tie them all together so that everything is just one big clump of stuff, and it's harder for the wind to take a big pile of stuff than it is for just one item. So,
Yep.
so you just kind of you can take all your lawn chairs and your your patio tables and all that, put it all around the stuff, and then just tie it all together. Another thing that would be really good, we were talking about boards for the windows. A lot of folks are getting impact windows.
Yeah.
I know that we have some neighbors that have gotten impact windows just so they didn't have to fool around with the plywood in case an emergency comes. And it's
Those are really great to have. I would suggest everybody, if you're able to get impact windows, if you live in a hurricane state, there's things that people that live in Kansas do because of their tornadoes, just because they live in
basements.
in a tornado prone location. So just because we're not right on the ocean doesn't mean that impact windows aren't great, a necessity, actually, a necessity for you to have here in Florida.
Storm shutters are good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically a permanent solution, or a better
Better than boards.
boards. Storm
Better
shutters
than
are definitely better
boards.
than boards.
Yes.
A lot of times you still got to go out and you got to put those on though, and some people think they're a little unsightly because they leave little studs around the outside of your window opening that are always there all year round, even if your storm shutters aren't up. There's other solutions. I mean, it just depends on what your preference is and how much money you want to spend. Boards are obviously the simplest. The one thing you really want to avoid is you want to avoid any broken glass. It's not that any of these things, like impact windows, for instance, the glass would still break if something hit it, but it's not going to allow an opening where wind pressure can come into your house. And that's what you want to avoid, because once your house becomes pressurized, that's when roofs blow off and terrible things happen, and that's what you want to avoid. So
Well, we're originally native to California, and we did not have hurricanes out in California. But a couple years ago, when we had, I think it was in 16, I'm trying to remember, but when we had those few hurricanes right in a row, a lot of the locals in the town we were in previous to this said, "Oh no, we never get a hurricane. Like they go around us, they go by us, they don't come anywhere near us. Don't worry about it." Then the next thing you know, by the second hurricane, all of the trees were blown over into the road. The power was out. Everybody's holed up in little parts of their house. We were holed up in our little camper. And it was interesting because I had just got back after the hurricane. I stay up at the hospitality area during hurricanes, so I'm not at home. My family is at home and they're hunkering down and doing what they need to do, but I come after everything's cleaned up in the aftermath. And I came through my neighborhood and there were trees knocked down everywhere and there was no power, and all you could hear was one or two generators between 3 blocks, us and 3 blocks, and it was just such an eerie sound. It was just total silence, and then you hear the drone of the engine on the generator, the 2 little generators going, and it was like, wow.
And by the way, we did not stay in our camper during the hurricane. We went in our camper after the hurricane because it was easier to power that off of a generator.
Yeah.
And of course, it's sweltering hot.
Yeah.
Just after a hurricane, all the just the weather conditions, it just makes it really uncomfortable.
Our fence was blown over someone else's yard, and
Yeah.
someone's fence was over this way. It was exactly what you see on TV for hurricanes, and I was like, all the locals said that it would not even pass. It just passes by us. It goes around us, and all their life, they've never seen a hurricane in this town. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, well, here it is. So that was crazy.
I'm trying to think of a funny story. The only thing that comes to mind is our neighbor, but it wasn't a hurricane. But our neighbor, they kept putting this, remember that? They kept putting one of those like tarp awnings that they could park their car under, and it was the neighbor behind us, so they're putting it in their backyard so they could, I guess, protect their van from the sun. And yeah, they spent a lot of time putting it down, and they were like sandbags and all around the poles, and they had buckets. Oh, they actually had it sitting in buckets of sand. That's what it was.
Like within 2 days of doing each thing that they were doing with the post,
spent a lot of time on this.
The thing would just blow over and was like all upside down somewhere.
Then,
it's over on the fence.
No, I actually witnessed it. I'm like standing at the backsliding door, and I was watching the trees because there was a big gust of wind. And all of a sudden, the gust of wind just catches that thing, lifts it straight up out of the buckets, flips it over, and sets it back down upside down.
Yeah.
And it was funny to me because I'm not the one that did all the work putting it there. I'm sure that my neighbors were like, oh man, because they really put a lot into that.
Yeah.
And they ended up going back out and putting it back up a couple of days later, but that was kind of humorous.
Yeah.
Well, it's a big difference there. Right now. Yeah, well, it's a big difference because
they always went around us, and they were not in our area.
No, that's not true. But the thing about a hurricane is you can. Well, first of all, you talking about planning, which is what we're really trying to drive home here, is that don't wait till the last minute to prepare for something. Even once you find out a hurricane is headed your direction. I mean, you know for quite a while. I mean, it's all over the radio, the news. They're talking about it. Yeah, it looks like it's gonna come right towards us. And then as time goes on, either it shifts or it keeps on coming. So you might have as much as a week, 5 days advance notice to be preparing. But once again, don't wait until that time to prepare. Be prepared before then. Whereas an earthquake, you don't know. They just happen. I mean, they have no idea when an earthquake's going to happen.
Things shake and you say, was that an earthquake?
Yeah.
I think it might have been. Let's turn on the TV and let's find out.
And there's different types of earthquakes, and you never know exactly where it's going to strike the worst. So earthquakes, you just always have to be prepared. It was something that we were taught in school, what to do in case of an earthquake, and you don't even know it's happening until it's actually happening. And at that point, it's just all about getting somewhere where you're safe, and that's the closest place.
But I will say a lot of the structures in high, where it's prevalent that earthquakes go through, the fault line areas, they have restructured those buildings to be able to withstand earthquakes. So a lot of them have been torn, or if they've crumbled during an earthquake, they've been rebuilt with some of those mitigations to be able to make it withstand the earthquakes. So
sure, yeah. In fact, that reminds me, if you remember at that city college in our hometown, they had that really beautiful brick building that just had a fence around it. They would never open it up, and that's because it didn't have any rebar in it. So they pretty much just condemned it. I don't know if they ever did anything with it or not. But it just kind of brings us back to, it's very important that the structures that we live in are prepared to protect us from Mother Nature, which can be brutal at times. So, yeah.
And it just makes sense to protect your home in that way.
I think it gives you a peace of mind. I know, we're in our new home now. It's a new old home. It's not a brand new home, but it's an old home, and we really like it. At the home that we were in before, we put impact windows because it gave us peace of mind. It's like, were we expecting a hurricane when we did it? No. Hopefully we never see another hurricane again. But if we do see it, or when we were in the home, if we were to see another hurricane, it gave us that peace of mind that we were protected, we were safe. And the goal is to eventually get impact windows in this home as well, and that just gives us peace of mind. That way, one less thing to do when it actually is headed your way. You don't need to worry about, even if you already have your boards, at least that's just one less thing you have to do.
Is there any benefits from like the power company or any other city source or local source for having impact windows?
Not for having impact windows, but for having new windows, most power companies, you do qualify for a rebate
Okay.
that they will give you, because new windows are, I'm going to say 99.9% of the time are going to be energy efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, there's something for the storm doors and windows or something like that.
not that I know of. We still need to protect them. Same frame of mind if they were old windows.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they're not impact means that if the wind catches something, blows it across your front or backyard or side yard, and it comes in contact with that window, more than likely it's going to break the window.
Right.
And two things can happen then. You're going to have broken glass inside, which can be a danger to you. Hopefully it doesn't hit anybody on the inside, which obviously that would not be good. And then the biggest thing, if neither one of those are an issue, is just letting all that wind pressure inside your house, which I don't know, it creates a vacuum. I'm sure you could probably go on YouTube and look at some of the things that happen to roofs and houses when the windows start breaking. So it's not a good thing. And going back to what Shannon was saying, you're right, Shannon. Actually, the insurance companies, if you...
I like homeowners insurance.
Yeah, your homeowner's insurance. If you get all impact windows and you meet all of the truss strap requirements and roof requirements and all the requirements that are needed for a good wind mitigation report, then your homeowner's insurance will give you a discount on your homeowner's insurance here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That I do know.
You also have to change out your doors to be storm rated doors also.
Right.
So every entrance,
Every
exit,
opening.
every opening in your home needs
Right.
to be
And your roof, and your trusses. When I say trusses, that's everything that's that your roof is sitting on, and it's got to be strapped down a certain way. And the reason for that, once again, is so that for wind uplift, so your roof doesn't take off.
And that is something you can do even if you don't, if those things are not something you have now. You can have
definitely
do the strapping for your roof and the windows and the storm doors.
Absolutely. I highly recommend it for, once again, it just gives you a sense of security.
Mm-hmm. And that's another good point about impact windows, the sense of security. So now you have a secure home also from intrusion and things like that.
Oh, sure.
So
there is a
that's another
security
great
about
reason.
them as well.
So yeah.
So it wasn't really my goal to go straight into windows or to go on and on about windows, but we ended up there. Obviously we specialize in new windows, and so that's something that we do want to touch on. But more than anything, I just really wanted to talk about hurricane preparedness and just offer people some tips, some tricks on,
Things to think about.
some things to think about and being prepared for this storm season. If you would like to take a closer look at a hurricane preparedness guide or just have one handy or to print one out, you can always go to our website at dccbuilders.com, or you can check out one of our social media at DCC Builders and tap the link and it will bring up the hurricane preparedness guide. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Shannon. And we're with DCC Builders.